Now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning / afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. My name is Ryan, and I'll be here with you over the next hour or so as we kind of talk about Meraki and seamless network management with City of Dalton. So very happy to have everyone with us today. Looks like a few folks are still kind of getting signed in there, so we'll kind of take this time to just get through some of the introductory material, and then we'll get into kind of the meat of the presentation here. So a quick agenda. We'll have an introduction to Meraki, a little bit about the architecture, a little bit around what does cloud managed IT look like, and why cloud management is important there. And then we'll get into the specific case study here about City of Dalton. After that, we will spend a bit of time actually taking a look at their live dashboard, so that'll be pretty exciting for us. At the conclusion today, we'll wrap up with just an overview of the Meraki product families, and we will have time for a Q&A session. So we'll keep about 10 or so minutes for questions. But speaking of that, I do have my colleague Tanya in the room with me today. She'll be fielding your questions via the questions toolbar, so make sure as those questions pop into your head, get those into the questions toolbar right away. That'll give us a chance to make sure that all of those questions are answered, and then we'll kind of take the last 10 minutes or so to take a look at kind of the more common questions for today. We're also really excited to be offering up the free access points for IT professionals joining us today. This is a 802.11n access point with a 3-year cloud management license. So really what I mean by that is that there's nothing separate you need to purchase here. We're not giving you like half of the product, and then having you purchase the rest, right? This is a fully functioning access point. You can install at home, put in your small business, play around with it, and we're pretty excited to be able to offer that because we really feel here at Meraki that the best way for you to understand this technology is to actually go configure it, plug it in, etc. So if you have any questions about the eligibility details, please do check out meraki.cisco.com/free AP. There is one other requirement in addition to attending today's webinar to completion, which is please do contact your Meraki sales rep. The point of this exercise is to confirm your shipping information. We've sent out too many APs to address correct, so we would love to make sure that we're actually sending it to the correct address. So please do contact them. Nothing will happen until you do this part of it. So very, very important component there. And I'll remind you one more time at the end of today's webinar. All right. So just a little bit about Cisco Meraki. So our goal here at Meraki is to simplify IT, right? And that goal was not our goal when we first started, right? When we were back in 2006, when Meraki got off the ground via some MIT grad students that had a great idea about kind of providing municipal level Wi-Fi, and then it turns out that they had an extremely hard time trying to manage that infrastructure. So that's kind of where Meraki was born out of. So definitely our goal here has evolved over time from cloud managed Wi-Fi into cloud managed IT. So let's talk about a little bit like what is like cloud managed, right? What do you mean by cloud management? What we mean by that is that from our very beginnings, right, we had this idea of cloud management in mind, meaning that anytime you wanted to, check on the status of your equipment, push down new configurations to your equipment, that you would do that all through just a simple browser-based dashboard, right? Now, one very important distinction here, this is our own complete portfolio, right? So we have our own wireless access point switches, security appliances, now communications, right, with the VoIP phones, and even an enterprise mobility management system called Systems Manager. So really, the Meraki solution is an integrated hardware, software, and cloud services solution. All these things kind of wrapped up into one. Meraki is not just like some cloud connector into your existing network, right? That you have to have like Meraki hardware in order to use the Meraki dashboard, and we'll talk about kind of all the benefits and features of that. This approach has, of course, led us to become the leader in cloud managed networking. I think if you take a look at the rest of the kind of competitive landscape out there, there are certainly companies that are implementing something similar. But I think what you'll find that's unique among, with Meraki is that you won't get that feeling that it was designed from the ground up with that in mind, right? It's more of like, okay, this is an additional connector that you can have and start managing your devices this way. Whereas Meraki, it was, born that way. It just kind of and evolved as such. So over 75,000 unique customers, millions of Meraki devices deployed, which is really crazy. So yeah, I'm really, really excited to be showing you the solution today. All right, so let's just talk a little bit about how this works, right? So we talk about like cloud management, right? So how does that work? What are the kind of logistics of it? So the first thing here is that the dashboard is extremely intuitive. Like the training required to implement a Meraki network is very, very minimal. I won't say that you don't have to understand networking. You absolutely have to understand networking, right? But when it comes down to memorizing CLI commands or having a 400-page handbook next to you as you're doing configs, those days are gone, right? It's all going to be very intuitive in dashboard. You're going to be able to completely understand what you're doing. The cloud acts as a centralized management platform. Okay, so that means that it stores all of your configurations, right? So even if you have a device that spontaneously combusts, not that it will, but if it did, the configuration for that device lives in the cloud, so that you never have to worry about, okay, when's the last time I baseline that? When's the time I backed it up? Did I have a running config on there that was never saved, etc.? The device reboots. You don't have to worry about those things with Meraki. Now, this diagram here off to the left here, this is just kind of a really basic, kind of diagram of how this works and what we mean by out-of-band cloud management. So one very important distinction here is that there's no user traffic passing through our cloud. Okay, so when you go, if I'm connected to that access point down there at the bottom, and I go to Google.com, of course my network traffic traverses the networking gear and pops out to the internet and goes right out my local ISP. Now, the fact that I went, to a website like Google, that analytic information is processed locally and then sent up to the cloud so that you can see it in the dashboard, right? So that's kind of the kind of cloud analytics piece there. So a very, very important distinction there. Now, this architecture is also extremely scalable, right? So whether you have one location, 500 locations, 1,000 locations, it doesn't matter. The cloud has kind of that infinite scalability there. Also, even with our architectures, like with our wireless architecture, for example, there's no wireless controllers, right? So you can keep adding APs, you can keep adding devices, new locations with just a few clicks. Now, of course, with this reliance on the cloud infrastructure, you want to make sure that that infrastructure is extremely reliable, and we do take that into consideration, right? We have 3 different data centers here in the U.S. that your data lives in, so you have primary backup and a secondary data center. Another important function here is that your network is going to continue to run even if, like, for some reason you can't talk to our cloud, right? It's not like a switch, has an identity crisis if it can't reach out to the cloud. It knows what it's supposed to do. It knows what its port configurations are. It only gets those kind of deltas from the cloud. If you go to change something, it's going to get that information from the cloud. But in terms of what it's supposed to be doing right here, right now, it knows what to do. So your network is going to continue to function even if the connection to the cloud is interrupted. And of course, with the 3 different data centers, 4 nines uptime is to be expected there. Other items of security, our backend system is also fully HIPAA or PCI compliant. So if you are an entity that has to deal with those types of compliance agencies, right, you can definitely show that Meraki is in compliance with those. We also do third-party security audits, right? This is a general strategy employed by almost every cloud vendor, right? We want to make sure that our backend system is as secure as possible, including penetration testing, etc. And then last thing here that kind of gets lost a little bit when you start talking about security is that really we take the pain out of doing firmware updates, right? I think if you look at the vendor landscape here over the last probably like 6-8 months, there's been a lot of news about security vulnerabilities in certain platforms, right? And it's not to say that those platforms aren't secure; they are absolutely secure. But the problem is there are loopholes found in older versions of those softwares, right? So basically, the IT staff had decided that the work that was involved in updating all the firmware was just too much, everything's working great on this version. We're going to keep it there. And then, of course, people found exploits in that, right? So it's always, every company wants you to have their most up-to-date firmware. So we here at Meraki, we want to make that as easy as possible. We do basically quarterly updates to each of the products. You can schedule these in Dashboard. The cloud facilitates all of that, pushes down the firmware updates. So really, we're taking the pain out of that so that you can keep your network up and running in the most secure way possible. So if you have any questions about this kind of stuff, reliability, security, definitely check out that link below, Cisco.com/trust. There's a ton of info there that can kind of help answer a lot of those questions. All right, so Meraki, I mentioned earlier, 75,000 unique customers. So we're just trusted like literally by thousands of customers. These are just some examples, right? So these are some public entities that are trusting with us with Meraki. The San Francisco Public Library. I think I saw Sandy. A lot of public libraries. A lot of public institutions, zoos, for example. I don't know why San Francisco Zoo is not on here, but they use this as well. So if you're ever in need of like just a reference customer, you want to talk to another agency that is similar size or similar deployment, we can definitely set those types of things up. I think the main thing here is that it's definitely a trusted brand at this point. All right. Now, I would like to introduce Darin Waldrop. He's the IT director at City of Dalton, and he's going to, spend a few minutes with us here, just talking about his deployment at Meraki. So this looks like a lovely picture of the Dalton City Hall. I have not had the pleasure of going to Dalton just yet, but Darin, welcome. Thank you very much for joining us. So why don't you take a second and introduce yourself?
Thank you, Ryan. Yeah, my name is Darin Waldrop. I've been the IT director here at City of Dalton for since 2003. Before that, I was an IT technician, IT or systems manager with the police department here in town. Basically, we have a very small IT team. It's just me and one other person, Joe Ward, who's here with me today. We have a fairly decent-sized city. We have about 600 employees, and of those, we have about 320 domain/email users, and around probably about 400 desktops and other devices that are on the network. As it says here, we've got 8 different departments covering about 11 buildings in the city, so we can be kind of spread thin quite a bit. And that was one of the key points, and the simplicity of Meraki is what drew us to it. So you can go on the next slide there.
Perfect. Yeah. Thanks for that introduction, Darin. So why don't you tell me a little bit about maybe like what your network looked like before Meraki, and then maybe tell me a little bit about the deployment that you guys did.
Yeah, definitely a mess sums it up very well. We had a lot of different components. We had HP, we had some Cisco, we had some D-Link, Netgear, you name it, we had it somewhere here in the city. All of it, or majority of it, was no longer supported under any kind of support contract. No real way to manage any of it at all. It is stuff that was kind of put in here and there before my time here and during my time here, and it finally got to the point with all the changes and just the way technology has grown and how much people are using it more here in the city now, that we had to kind of consolidate all that stuff, all that technology, and really get into one system where we can manage everything as simply as possible. And like I said, being a team of 2 of us, neither of us have a lot of true networking experience. We wanted the whole dashboard interface, and that's kind of that was our first key selling point for Meraki, was their dashboard and the whole managed in the cloud scenario. So I guess looking at the implementation we did, we ended up going with dual firewalls for redundancy purposes here at City Hall. We have about 19 switches throughout the city. And we're also in the process now of adding about 30 access points for wireless connectivity throughout our city buildings, both for internal access to the network and for public access to our citizens here in the community. The dashboard and the team that came in and implemented we use DICES for our team here for implementation. With their help, we had the entire implementation done in a week, minus the wireless, and it was very smooth. It was easy to configure everything, and the dashboard has been a godsend to us for troubleshooting issues. We've had recently, after the implementation, we had a rogue PC sending spam, and through the dashboard we were able to pinpoint the port and find the desktop that was doing that, and we were able to shut it down pretty quickly using Meraki for troubleshooting. Also, with Meraki and the dashboard and their mobile app on smart devices, we can be anywhere, at a conference, at home, on vacation, God forbid, and be able to look at our network and get a good snapshot of what's going on, and be able to see if there's any issues. And it's just been very helpful to us in all aspects.
Great, that's a great explanation. And I'm going to put you on the spot here. One of the things that we always focus here on Meraki is that we know that there's folks like Darin out there that have probably wear many different hats, right? And we want a network component to just kind of fade in the background of the day. So I'd be curious, is the dashboard something you log into every single day? Is it something that, hey, you know what, I get an alert if something goes wrong, and I only log in those instances? Or what is your kind of day-to-day interaction?
Day-to-day, I'm one of those, I've got the dual monitors, and I usually have that up in the background somewhere where I've always got it, on hand, where I can just flip to it and look at it. If somebody calls up or sends an email saying, hey, internet's a little slow here, or, I'm not getting this kind of response, I can have the dashboard right there. I can see, the traffic on the whole of the network, or I can, drill down to the specific switch they're located on, or the port they're on their computer, and see what kind of traffic they're getting. So, we've had issues where people complain about, speed and bandwidth, and we look at their computer and it's like, oh, well, I see you're streaming, Pandora at the same time. And, things like that, where we can, pinpoint the issue fairly quickly. I think sometimes the users don't realize how much we can see out there with the dashboard. So we see just all aspects of the traffic.
That's awesome, and yeah, we'll definitely touch on that when we, when we get into the demo here. We'll kind of show off, Darin's configuration here. Anything else you'd like to mention, Darin, about the deployment, or kind of, any thoughts moving forward?
Well, I know one thing we added a little bit later was we have an airport, or a municipal airport here in the city, and they are completely off our net, or we're completely off our network. And we used Meraki and your, single-click VPN, and set up them on a VPN tunnel back into our city networks. Now we have their entire building on the city network, just like it was an office across the street. And the VPN setup was, I'll have to admit, we made it a lot more difficult than it needed to be. We spent some time on it trying to figure out, and we finally got on the phone with support, and literally it was 2 or 3 clicks that we should have done from the beginning. We would have been connected, and we were just making it way more difficult than it needed to be. So that just shows how simple it can be to set up those point-to-point VPNs, and that's really helped us out with some of these outlying locations we have.
That's perfect. Excellent. Yeah. So, Darin, tell us about. So, was that card? Did I get a little ahead of myself? Or tell me. Actually, no, I didn't get ahead of myself. Tell me about any future plans to kind of change the way the City of Dalton functions.
Well, definitely in rolling out our wireless side of it. Before each building had somewhat of some connectivity, but none of it was really connected or centrally managed. With our Meraki APs here now, we're in the process of setting up, multiple SSIDs that span across the entire city, where we can give the public access to internet, and if need be, throttle the bandwidth a little bit lower. At the same time, give our employees access to our city network over a Wi-Fi connection, and feel sure that it's secure and safe, and that the two won't really clash at all. So that's something we're really excited about getting into. We're also looking at a project at one of our sport complexes here. We have a park with a number of softball fields, and we're looking at that is also off network. We are looking at using Meraki and doing a small mesh network at that area, and basically pulling internet and network connectivity from a nearby fire station, and then provide a mesh network, both wirelessly and wired, to that park for some growth there. And also, we're interested in the Z1 teleworker gateway devices in our patrol cars and possibly our fire trucks as well. Currently, we're on the just the standard. We use Verizon air cards here and use some software to manage and maintain that VPN. But I'm really interested in the Z1 device and how it could help us with a VPN type tunnel and give us a full wireless hotspot that the officers and the firefighters can use.
That's great. That sounds like pretty exciting projects. All right, perfect. Well, Darin, thank you so much for spending some time with us today, and then letting me do what I'm about to do, which is jump into your live dashboard here and kind of show everyone those dashboards that you look every day. So again, thank you very much for joining us today. No problem. All right, perfect. So enough of the PowerPoint, even though these are really cool PowerPoints. Let's get into the actual dashboard here. So what I'm going to do is I've actually kind of logged into Darin's network here at City of Dalton. I'm going to start here on what's called the org overview page, and this page here is really showing us kind of where Darin has devices, and I don't think Darin has anything over here in Mountain View, California, but I'll kind of talk about that here in a second. But this page here is really just a great way to see the health of your entire infrastructure, from one glance. Okay, so you can see that this is the City of Dalton and Dalton support. When Meraki devices are born, they get initialized with a location out here in California, and that's probably what that is here. But here we can see he's got, City of Dalton, Dalton Airport, both those networks are green. So to talk real quick about how the dashboard is just kind of structured, like how do you navigate around this? How does that work? There are basically an organization, right? So the City of Dalton is an organization, and within that organization, you can actually have any number of networks. So these networks are essentially just different configurations. So if you wanted to have, like going back to Darin's example, if you want to have like a park network that has the park access points and have those have a separate configuration, you could absolutely do that. And now you could have like a City of Dalton network plus a park network, etc., and kind of sync any changes as needed between them. So that's kind of how the dashboard is structured. You can create networks for different physical locations and kind of use those to kind of manage those differences. Now, if we dive into Dalton, which is where we'll spend kind of a lot of our time here, the first page that we'll see is the clients page. Okay, so this is where Darin would be able to log in and see anyone who's connected to any one of his devices and pass traffic. Right, so then we can see that this is over the last day. If we expand this out, let's go to say like the last week. So we can kind of use this to identify, okay, yep, kind of typical traffic patterns. Looks like maybe every day in the morning, maybe there's some backups or something happening there, because those are pretty kind of consistent spikes there. And then looks like on was that July 8th, they had a huge spike. Looks like around noontime. I wonder what we should be able to find out exactly what that spike was. I have an idea. So if I wanted to look at this particular clients, I can see, we got a camera server, we got a bunch of different devices in here, and you can see that we're pulling in the MAC address of the device. If the device happens to have a name, like a host name assigned to it, it will actually assign the name here as well. We can see IP address information. We can see if there's a policy assigned to them, and you can actually customize these views. So if you wanted to see like if they logged in with something, or there are different IP addresses, or the manufacturer of the device, if they have Systems Manager installed, the user information, if they logged in with any credentials, etc., you can start to add in and customize this display to kind of be exactly what you want it to be. Now, this little Wheel of Fortune chart over here, if we expand this out, well, first of all, we can hover over it and we can see the different types of traffic that are in use, right? So a lot of iSCSI traffic, which is kind of network storage, Windows file sharing, etc. If I expand this out, I can actually now get a sense of kind of exactly what these applications are. Again, sorting by usage here. So if I wanted to see, for example, like Google Video, 80 gigs of Google Video traffic over the last week, which is pretty incredible. If we expand this down, we can actually see the different types of applications we can fingerprint. And I can assure you, Darin did not have to spend time setting this all up, right? This is all just traffic that is categorized right out of the box. So, for example, we wanted to look at who's watching the most ESPN. We can click on ESPN and see that this particular device here has used 35% of the rule. And if I needed to take action on that device, right, I need to say, hey, you know what, you're watching way too much ESPN. That doesn't sound productive. I can click onto this particular device and now use this to assign a policy. So I can come in here and be like, okay, well, I'm going to create a group policy that blocks you, or I'm just going to give you a blocked message that says, no more ESPN. Etc. And now that user, when they logged in, would see this message from IT, right? So there's a lot of really granular ways that we can not only see exactly what's happening on the network, but then dig in and understand, and take some really granular action on those particular users or applications. Okay. So let's go back to the clients page here. This page here is also extremely searchable. So if you're trying to help a user with something, you say, hey, what's your IP address? And they give you their IP address, and I can search for maybe like the last octets of their IP address and be like, okay, well, you told me your IP address is 4.12. Okay, I've searched for 4.12. Here's your client, and I can click on that and now understand exactly what's going on, right? Immediately begin that troubleshooting. So this page here, very, very versatile. This is like one of probably the go-to pages to just understand what users are doing on the network. Now, let's we're going to step through each of the different products here at City of Dalton, but what we'll do is we'll start on the very kind of edge. Like we'll start over here on the security appliance and we'll work our way inwards. So let's go over here to the security appliance, and this is the first time we're going to look at some actual kind of physical hardware, right? So here is the firewall, and we can see that it is a primary and a spare, right? So I can actually see that one device is set as the current master, and if I want to look at the status for that device, I can do that. I can see that there's a passive device ready to go. Now, to configure this, right, it's very, very simple. Like all you have to do is come over here to the addressing and VLANs page, right, and all you have to do is specify the serial number of the spare. Right? That's it. Now, once you do that, the cloud automatically knows, okay, this serial number is the primary, this serial number is the spare. Anytime Darin comes in here and makes a config change to the primary device, it automatically gets synced to the spare, which is really, really important. Another really cool component of this is that when it comes down to Meraki licensing, to do a HA combo like this, you only need one license for that. So, of course, you need the two physical pieces of hardware, but together with that, you only need the one license. All right, other things that we can see here. We can see that Darin does update available. This is actually doesn't surprise me because we just released this update last week. It has a ton of new features built into it, such as iWAN and AMP integration. So we'll have a blog post about it. There'll be a ton of information there. I won't spend too much time talking about those new features here today because we want to focus on kind of how City of Dalton is utilizing this equipment. But when we talked earlier on the PowerPoint slide, I mentioned that we want to make the firmware upgrade process as easy as possible, right? So you can see here, update available. If I were to click this, it takes me over to the firmware update page, right? So Darin would be able to come in here and say, all right, well, there's new firmware available for my switches. Okay, let's schedule the upgrade for, I don't know, we'll do it Saturday morning at, we want to do it super early in the morning. So we'll do it a Saturday morning at 3 o'clock Eastern, right? Same thing for the security appliance. I want to schedule that for an update. I can schedule it whenever I'd like. Now, I won't save this, Darren, don't worry. But you can come in here and see how easy that is. Now, for his security appliance, what do you think is going to happen, right? It's going to push down that security update to both of his devices, right? Same thing for the switches. Every single switch in his network will get the firmware update at the specified time. So really, really simple to manage that process. Like I said, we want to make it as easy as possible because updating and keeping everything on the latest version of firmware is extremely important when it comes to security. All right, off to the side here, we have a GUI showing us what ports are in use, right? So we can see internet ports in use, LAN 2 is in use here. We can see historical connectivity. So did the device at all? Did we have any like blips in coverage or anything like that? We can expand this out to say like the last week. We can see here that the connectivity graph will update, the usage graph will update to kind of show us, nope, it's been connected this entire time, right? We have uplink information, so we can see IP address. We can see, what the public IP address is. This one, of course, since there's an HA pair, there is a virtual IP address for the pair. We can see uplink traffic, so we can see total traffic plus also downloaded traffic. We can see we have some tools here available, and these tools are extremely important when it comes to troubleshooting. So, for example, Darren's out to lunch, him and Joe, and they get a phone call saying, hey, I can't print, or I can't get to some resources at the police department or something like that. That's going to be a pretty critical problem, right? Like if people can't get to their resources. So even from the mobile app or just pulling up dashboard within their web browser, they could come in here and have a tool like a ping tool available, and they can start to run ping tests. Or if they want to do a trace route to understand kind of maybe what's going on there. And then worst comes to worst, if they do need to like reboot the device or something like that, they can absolutely execute those commands all remotely. So you're going to find these live tools across every single one of our products, and it's going to be really, really important for troubleshooting. All right. Another feature that we'll talk about here, there's a lot of stuff that we do on the security appliance, by the way. There's like, you can set up all your VLANs here. Of course, it runs DHCP. Of course, you have firewall rules, right, to kind of limit where traffic can go, right? Those are all kind of pretty common things that almost every firewall can do, right? So I'm not going to spend too much time focusing on them. But what I do want to kind of show off when it comes to the firewall is just how easy it is to set up certain types of firewall rules. So we can come down here and see that Darin has implemented a slew of layer 7 firewall rules, right? So if Darin wants to block Netflix, all he had to do is add a rule here saying block Netflix, right? Like you don't have to figure out where the IP addresses are coming from or et cetera, and define these rule sets, et cetera. These are all pre-populated rules directly into here. So it looks like a lot of streaming services are blocked here, which is of course understandable, right? When we're talking about municipal networks like this, we need those bandwidth resources to be as available as possible. We don't need policemen not being able to get to their resources when they're trying to do something critical because someone is watching Game of Thrones or something like that, right? Which, by the way, you don't have HBO blocked here. That would be 100% the loophole that I would find. So you might want to come in and add HBO Go here. But you can see adding a new rule is extremely easy, right? Even if you wanted to come in here and block traffic to or from particular countries, right? I can say, City of Dalton has no business, doing anything outside the United States. So we'll just go ahead and say anything that's not to or from a United States, IP address. We're going to go ahead and block that, right? So, Darin, do you have any thoughts on kind of, how this setup was, how you guys came to these decisions to block these resources? Did you use some of the client data, or did you come in here and say, you know what, we need to protect some of these resources right off the bat?
It was a little bit of both. It was more just kind of viewing the client data after a few months of having the system in place and kind of seeing where our hotspots were, and knowing, just knowing that people trying to stream stuff, it really takes a hit to our bandwidth, and bandwidth is a premium to us right now. So that's why we kind of target a lot of the streaming services to like you said, to get as much bandwidth as possible to the services we do need it for.
Perfect. And just to confirm what I said earlier, right? Have you ever had to come in and like update the Netflix rule, or is it just kind of was always there in the background?
No, it was just always there in the background. So really, truly a couple clicks, and there we know it's been denied, and we're blocking that now. So.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, we have a team here that just, look, well, not they're not dedicated to this. They have other things that they do, but we keep all these services up to date because we know that it's always a moving target, right? So we're always classifying new types of traffic, so that we can kind of keep all those analytics up to date. So yeah, extremely easy to do. We got some port forwarding rules in here. So again, these are all kind of typical things you'd find on many different firewalls. So let's go take a look at the next main feature I do want to talk about here, which is the site-to-site VPN. Because like Darin mentioned, like site-to-site VPNs can be rather complex to set up, right? Like you have to have, configure each end of the tunnel. You got to make sure you have public IP address information, right? And if you don't have a device that has a public IP address, now you're setting up like port forwarding rules, etc., on those upstream devices. And also, what if you don't have a static public IP address, right? You got to worry about the public IP address changing, and then of course having to rebuild your tunnel, etc. Meraki Auto VPN takes care of all of that, right? And when I mean all of that, I really do mean all of that. It does your phase 1, phase 2 negotiations for you. If you don't have static public IP addresses, it does not matter, right? Because each of those devices contacts the cloud, and we can detect their public IP address from that connection, right? So if we detect that a public IP address ever changes, we will automatically rebuild your tunnel for you. What about if, in 6 months from now, Darin decides that he does want to advertise VLAN 200 out to the world, right? All he'd have to do is come in here and toggle this to yes, and now the cloud is smart enough to detect that, hey, you know what, one of the VPN peers just decided to advertise a new route. I bet all of the other peers it's connected to would love to know about that route, right? So I'll go ahead and automatically rebuild the tunnels to include that route. So it kind of works like a dynamic routing protocol in that sense. So what I'll do is, I'll just kind of walk you through what this looks like. When by default, it looks like this, right? So you come in and you say, am I a hub or a spoke? Generally for smaller VPN deployments, if you have like 5, 6 sites or something like that, you're going to deploy these mainly as all hubs, right? So every site will have a VPN connection to every other site. When you start getting into larger VPN deployments, of course, you convert into what's called a hub and spoke topology. So spokes only create a VPN connection with the hub, which then, of course, relays that information to other spokes if it's going there. So we'll choose hub here. You just toggle these subnets to yes or no, and you save the changes. That's it. You're off and running. This side of the tunnel is completely set up. If you do need to integrate with a non-Meraki device, it still is absolutely possible. You just come in here and give us the same information that you would typically set up on any other third party, right? You give us the public IP, tell us what subnets that for example, Spillman is going to be sending to us. We define our IPsec policies, we give our pre-shared key, and we're off and running. So none of this underlying technology is reinventing how IPsec tunnels work, right? Like this is still an IPsec tunnel with the same levels of encryption, etc., same levels of security. The cloud is helping you provision these and making it much simpler to manage. For example, one of the kind of key things about keeping your VPN tunnel secure is making sure that every probably like month or so that you come in and change this pre-shared key, because if someone has access to that, they could potentially have access to the tunnel, right? So the cloud changes it every 8 hours automatically. So very, very simple to do and set up. Now, there's also a really beautiful VPN status page, and I don't know if there's actually a ton. Oh, there is. There we go. So we got the VPN status page here, and we can see the VPN connection here to the Dalton airport. So this is a great way to just kind of analyze, how much traffic is coming across the VPN tunnel, what the latency looks like, etc. So you can see here that we got one connection over to the Dalton airport. It's not a lot of traffic over the last week, only 6 megs of usage, and with about 63 milliseconds of latency. So yeah, a beautiful VPN status page that you can come in and kind of check the status of all that. All right, so a couple other key things here built in to the firewall, and then we'll kind of quickly move on. We do have built-in security aspects, right? So we got threat protection built in. This is leveraging, SourceFire products such as IDS IPS and SourceFire's AMP product. Those that AMP is being one of the newer features. So that's of course integrated here. We have built-in content filtering, right? So if you want to come in and block adult content, botnet, spam sources, etc., you could see that there's 100+ different categories to choose from here that you just select out of the drop-down list, and then it downloads that list, or in this case, it just sends that traffic off to be queried against these rather extensive lists of URLs, and then will automatically block that. So when you look at kind of what a UTM solution, which means like a Unified Threat Management Firewall is, it's kind of taking all of those services that we just talked about and consolidating it into one box, right? And Meraki certainly fits that profile. All right, enough about the security appliance. Let's kind of go over to the switches. So I'll go over here down to the switch menu, and now notice kind of what I'm doing. I was looking at my firewall. Now I'm looking at my switches. The difference it being about a 1/4 inch on my screen. This is kind of going back to that single pane of glass, right? To manage all these devices, you're in one dashboard. I'm not logging out. I'm not SSHing in. I'm not looking up a IP address in an Excel spreadsheet. I'm just going down here to switches, and I'm going to click on switches, and then I'm going to look at all my switches, right? Very, very basic. We can see Darin has 19 different switches deployed here. It looks like ranging from like access layer to distribution maybe layer, fiber aggregation layer here, right? Core switches. We can see the health of all these. These aren't arbitrarily green. It's not like our favorite color here, Meraki. It is our favorite color, but that's not why we chose this color. They're green because they're talking to the cloud. There's no problems, right? So when Darin mentioned like having this up on a screen, if something changed, you'd be able to immediately see that. Plus, I'm sure they got alerts set up, etc., and you'd know exactly when there's a problem. So let's kind of filter on this. I can see this distribution switch has quite a bit of usage. Let's kind of click on this and see exactly what's going on. So when we click into a switch, we can see IP address information. We can see connectivity history again. We can see a nice GUI again showing us what ports are in use. So, for example, wherever this is deployed, Darin, where is this one deployed?
That's one of our switches here at City Hall.
City Hall, got it. So if Darin was like, hey, you know what, I need to bring up I'm going to add a camera into City Hall or whatever it is, right? Do I have any ports available? You log in the dashboard, yep, I got plenty of ports available, right? So I can see exactly what ports are in use. I can even see link speeds, right? So the brighter green color here, I don't know if that comes across on the screen share, but the brighter green color means that it's a gigabit connection. These darker green mean they're 100 meg connections. Looks like maybe we have some some redundant links here. So we got some spanning tree discarding. Even this one, check this out. This is actually telling me, hey, this was supposed to be a gigabit, but the link failed, so I've downshifted to a lower speed to accommodate, right? Now, if I wanted to troubleshoot something like that, again, I have live tools. So again, the ping tool, right? We already talked about, but the cable test tool, right? The cable test, if I wanted to see exactly what was going on there, I could run a cable test to see if I, did I lose a couple pairs? Did someone trip over the wire and pull out one of my pairs or something like that? I can run a cable test. Now, I won't do it on that one because I don't want to interrupt the traffic right now, but if I were troubleshooting it, I absolutely would. But I could run a cable test here on, like, say, port 16, and it'll just run a quick test and say, hey, do I have any, problems? Do I have any, kinks or anything like that? This looks like a 3-meter cable. All my pairs are good. Exactly. I don't need to get off my desk here and go check out what's going on with port 16, right? If I needed to, going back to my camera example, I have a camera plugged in here, and now that camera's misbehaving or something like that. I want to bounce power on it to reboot it. Sorry. I just put in the port number, cycle power on the port, right? Really, really simple to do. Again, if I need to, break glass and go to drastic measures here, I can, of course, also completely reboot the switch directly from this console. One other thing I'll kind of mention about the switch side of things, and Darin, maybe you can add some color here if you actually use this feature. But when you were going through and doing this configuration, did you use the kind of virtual stacking functionality at all?
I don't believe we did much, no.
Okay. Well, yeah, no worries. I'll kind of show you guys how this feature works, though. So let's say, for example, today's Tuesday. Darin wakes up tomorrow on Wednesday, and he goes, you know what? I need to, install some new services. I'm going to install new cameras everywhere, and I need to make sure that I have ports provisioned across the board, right? So I have 678 switch ports here, right? 19 different switches, but we decided, you know what? We're gonna plug this new your service into, let's say, port 10. We're going to plug in port 10. So remember, we had 19 switches, so we got 19 port 10s, which of course makes sense. If I decided, you know what, I need to modify the configuration, you can notice here that almost all of them have a different configuration. If I wanted to change these all, I can just simply click highlight, click edit. I'm going to update 19 different switch ports across 19 different switches, change whatever I'd like about the switch port here, and click update. Now, that one config change, right, would go out to 19 different switches all at once. Right, so you wouldn't have to go switch by switch by switch by switch to push out those config changes. Now, that's a pretty silly example. You know, no one just wakes up and decides they're going to configure every port 10. But a more practical example here would be to use something like tags, right? So say, you know, I wanted to tag all of my ports that had those IP cameras plugged into them. I can actually do that same search logic and apply tags, and then the next time I wanted to change anything about that or I wanted to see status about those ports, I can simply filter based on that tag. So this page here is what we refer to as virtual stacking, right? The cloud is our control platform into every single device, and we can push out those config changes rather easily. Now, the last thing I'll show you here on the switches is the topology page. So this is a page that live maps Darin's entire network, right? So if I had to choose one page I'd leave up, you know, in the background of my device, it would definitely be this one, because this is not only showing me the status of all my devices, right? I can see green again, meaning they're online, but I can actually see how everything is interconnected. If I wanted to hover over any of these ports, I can see kind of the different ports that they go to. I can see, you know, for example, here's an access point plugged in that goes to port 48. If I needed to dive in and do some troubleshooting on this, I can just click directly on the port. We have tools built in, such as, you know, the running a packet capture. You can run a packet capture on our wireless interfaces, our wired interfaces, internet interfaces, VPN interfaces. You have a built-in packet capture tool. Again, you're doing all this troubleshooting while being, you know, potentially like a building that's halfway across town, right? So really, really simple, intuitive troubleshooting tools and really, really easy ways to kind of understand how your network is being utilized. All right, one last product to talk about here, and then we'll kind of wrap up and get to your guys' questions. And the access points. So we know that Darin's in the kind of beginning stages of this deployment, but I want to kind of use this as a really cool way to talk about one awesome feature with Meraki, which is called zero-touch provisioning. So, Darin, I'm going to put you on the spot again here. So right now, tell me what you would do if you were going to say, I'm going to ship out these, you know, 5 locations. What would you have to do once you got on site to configure these access points?
Really nothing at all. Just go plug them into a port on a Meraki switch, and they'll pull the SSID configurations that have already been applied to the other switches, because we've got those as global to all switches. So it's very, very easy. Just pretty much plug and play.
That's exactly what I wanted you to say. So yeah, essentially, they're already added into this network, right? So remember we talked about earlier in the dashboard demo here, we said, hey, these different networks are just kind of buckets of configuration. Well, these access points are in this bucket, right? So all of these guys here already have their configuration. They know exactly what SSIDs to be broadcasting. They know what version of firmware they're supposed to be on, etc., right? And if I clicked into one of these access points, I'd be able to see that, okay, this one is actually broadcasting this COD public. One is off right now. That's okay. So these other access points, as soon as they got plugged into a network connection anywhere, they don't even have to be into a Meraki switch. That's just because, of course, Darin has Meraki switching. But these just get an internet connection anywhere. They reach out to the cloud. They download their config. They check for firmware updates, and they're off and running and now acting just like every other access point in this network. So that is what we refer to here at Meraki as zero-touch provisioning, right? Out of the box, you can basically add these serial numbers in. These serial numbers, you know, Darin of course has them, but they could be on a UPS truck somewhere, right? As soon as you have the serial numbers, which of course are associated with your Meraki order number, you can log into the dashboard, add the serial numbers in, name them, and you know, make sure that their configuration is all completely up to date. So other things here on the wireless side of things that, like on the switching side, on the wireless side, we have a lot of other features, but we'll kind of focus on a couple things here. On the wireless piece, very, very simple to do any type of wireless authentication, right? Whether it's WPA2 Enterprise, whether it's setting up a guest network. We have a built-in mode that's called NAT mode, which is perfect for guest networks. Essentially, It sets up its own DHCP scope for those clients. It keeps those guests completely isolated from each other. And then again, using our firewall and traffic shaping page here, we can come in here and specify one rule, which of course Darin has specified here, which is deny anything access to the local LAN. And now that SSID is completely isolated. Can't touch anything on the local network. The only thing it can talk to is directly out to the internet. Other really cool things that we have built in. We have like a third radio built into every single one of our access points, which is really cool because it's used for things like automatically optimizing your RF settings, right? Of course, access points have these different channels and radio settings and power levels, etc. Automatically kind of optimizes that. And it can even be used to give you some location information, right? So I don't know if we have this set up here, but this can tell you like a location heat map. So we can see, for example, we do have some placed on the map here. So this is a page showing us, hey, yep, we got some access points in this area, and the colors indicate kind of how much utilization is going on. So we know, of course, that we're not full into the wireless deployment yet, so not a lot of usage on these guys just yet. But if you wanted to see, for example, like over time, you're like, okay, well, maybe I see like, there's a lot more usage in this area. Like you can see it's kind of glowing a little bit more red there. A lot more usage over in this area than I see in any other area. That means that there's more, wireless users connecting over in this area, right? So just a really cool way to kind of give you some visual representation in terms of how your network is being utilized over time. And then we also have one last thing here, which is the location analytics. Which can be used to kind of show you, hey, if we put this in a park and we wanted some data about, well, how many people come to the park, right? I can see that, how many people kind of just walked by the edge of the park, or how many people actually stayed in the park, right? And then how many people actually took advantage and used our Wi-Fi, right? These are metrics that you could use to justify the cost of a project, or, justify that, hey, we need a little more access points in there because we do have a lot of users. This is also information that's going to be really important to other, entities within the government, right? They're going to want to know, hey, are our resources being utilized, et cetera, right? So this is all functionality that's completely built in to the product. So with that, I want to make sure we get through your questions today. So I'm going to jump back over into the PowerPoint here, and again, I'll just really quickly cover just an overview of our product families, and you've heard me talk about these so far. So we do have access points, security appliances, switches, systems manager, which is of course enterprise mobility management, and of course the Meraki phone, which is our brand new product portfolio. So we do have a complete cloud managed IT portfolio, all managed to that dashboard that we just saw. So with that, I want to thank Darin again for joining us today, letting us poke around his network, see exactly what's going on. And what we're going to do is pause for a few questions. But before that, I did have one more slide. Next steps here. So anyone, if you guys want to try any device, right? So this is not talking about the one that you get for free that is yours to keep. This is if you want to try out a different model of access point. You want to try out a switch, a security appliance. We have risk-free evaluation. We cover the shipping both ways. Check out our website and blog. There's a ton of information posted there, new features, new products, etc. And then lastly, I told you I'd remind you one more time, don't forget to contact your Meraki rep, confirm that shipping information so you can get your access point sent out to you. So with that, thank you, everyone. I'll take a pause for just a second to look at some of the common questions and be back to answer those live. All right, perfect. It looks like Tanya's been busy answering all those questions. I do have a couple here that we can go ahead and answer right off the bat. So, can you block desktop clients? So yes, on a firewall or on a switch, if you want to block a particular desktop client, you absolutely can. I believe that just means that they're wired into the network as opposed to wirelessly connected. But yes, absolutely. With layer 7, can you limit instead of block bandwidth? And yes, that's absolutely true. So one thing I did not show you, I showed you the layer 7 firewall. There's also another section called traffic shaping, which although all those same rules that we had predefined, you can set specific bandwidth limits. So instead of like blocking Netflix or something like that, you can go in and set it to 500 kilobits a second or a megabit per second, whatever it is. There's a question here about how much bandwidth are they using, and do they limit bandwidth on different VLANs? So I think that might be there might be a question for like just overall how much bandwidth are they using, and I can of course bring that back up here. So let's bring that up here. Make sure that's not blank. So if we go back over just to network-wide clients here, this page here will give us a pretty good sense of kind of what that bandwidth usage looks like. So it kind of peaks out. Looks like at certain times it may have peaked up pretty high there. Maybe like I don't know. I guess averaging maybe 100 megs or something like that over time, but not a whole lot of bandwidth utilization, and this is of course across every single one of their locations. So this page here can be used to get a pretty good sense of that. Another question here for Darin: is the city using any fiber resources? You want to take that one, Darin?
Yeah, all of our department buildings are connected via fiber ring here in the city. So we have all of our point-to-points are fiber, all running gigabit.
Perfect. Okay. Excellent. Another question here about SSID containment. So yeah, that's another great feature of that third radio on the access point. So that's under this functionality that we call Air Marshal. The generic term for that is called WIPS, Wireless Intrusion Prevention. So essentially, yeah, you can use that if someone were to say bring their own wireless router in and plug it in on the network somewhere. This Air Marshal feature can detect that and automatically contain it, so that users aren't connecting through that SSID as well. There's another question here about how do we find our Meraki rep. So there's a general sales line you can call into at any time, and we'll make sure we route you accordingly. Their contact information should also be in your webinar reminder email, so check that out. There should be a name in there and their contact information as well. All right, let's see how many other questions we can answer. Question here from Joshua: Can we console devices locally? There is a local config page for every single product, which is like for the access points is called my.meraki, and there's wire.meraki, switch.meraki. There are some local config changes, mainly to do with like kind of the uplink information. On the switches, you can also configure switch ports, etc. But a bulk of the configuration is going to come from the cloud, and there is no like CLI or anything like that. John, yes, every device does have the zero-touch config capability. AP switches, phones, etc. All do have that. Jay, question about traffic prioritization. Yes, on the security appliance, you can prioritize traffic going out to the internet, and you can do that again based on ports by application, IP address and port, etc. Question here from Chris. With content filtering, can you pull web history based on Active Directory user? Yes, you can pull a list of every single website that has triggered a block message based on a user. If you have other tools like syslog servers, you can actually export all the flows into syslog and use syslog to kind of parse through that. We don't give you a page where you just look at every single URL a user went to. I think we do have some kind of feature like that on the way, but I think right now syslog is the best answer for that, but you can get access to that information. Garrett, question about IWAN. IWAN is available now. It is a general release. IWAN is just kind of summarize what that is. IWAN is basically a set of features that, so first of all, IWAN is the Cisco terminology. The generic industry-wide terminology is called SD-WAN. So if you're trying to look up more information about it, Google SD-WAN, not IWAN. So it's basically software-defined WAN. So basically it's putting some intelligence about how you route traffic across VPN tunnels. So for example, if you have two different ISPs connecting two different locations, we can actually build 4 VPN tunnels between those locations and then intelligently route traffic between them based on performance. So that's kind of what IWAN's all about. So another question here from Joshua. Yeah, so the configuration changes do need to be made with the ISP intact, right? Again, the cloud is going to be pushing down most of your config changes, right? But like I said, the network will continue to function even if your internet is down, right? So as soon as the internet comes back up, you'll be able to push out any config changes there. All right, perfect. One last question here. Can restrict data flow? Can basically yes. So, and can you set this up on a time? So basically, the question was, can you set bandwidth restrictions, and can you make it time-based? Absolutely. So with our group policies, you can make a time-based group policy, and that will be used to you can do all kinds of things in a group policy. Adjust the content filtering settings, set bandwidth restrictions, adjust the layer 3, layer 7 firewall, etc. So yes, you can absolutely do that all within a group policy. So. Unfortunately, folks, we are out of time. Darin, thank you again for joining us. Really appreciated your time and your experience there. So thank you again. And thank you everyone else for attending today. Any questions that didn't get answered, we will be sending over to your sales rep. So make sure you do contact them. Thank you, guys.